like in this one, there's two timelines because all the stuff from Bunny back in the year 1999, or no, sorry, early 2000, and it's the main one's like 2016. But yeah, the actual action. The only one that doesn't, I think, is Angels in the Moonlight because there's a sort of they're following somebody, so that goes on for a couple of months. But yeah, and that's again just something odd that you notice about yourself when you're writing. But yeah, I think they do build, and I think it's just I think it's good. Like I'm watching Line of Duty at the moment, not the one that's on. This is for all our international. It's a very big series in Britain at the moment. It's like the one everybody's talking about, but it's on season 6. I'm back in season 2 because I'm proper, old school. I'm quite the hipster, but yeah, but that is a show that really ridiculously builds and builds and builds. I don't know if you've watched it, Rob, but there's a lot of twists and turns, and it's just drama. Like it really does push it, and it does it brilliantly. But yeah, I guess it's just a technique thing. But I think you're right. Yeah, it probably is something that probably happens over all the books. Yeah.
Okay. So when did you write the book? It was about 5 years ago.
God, yeah, I think it was weird. Oh yeah, the weird thing about it was thinking back to that was one of the odd things about reading it was basically I wrote almost all of the book before Man One of Those Faces came out. It was basically I wrote Man With Those Faces. We were sending it out to agents and trying to get somebody interested. And as we discussed previously, nobody was too funny, too Irish. All that nonsense was going on. And I'd really enjoyed writing it. And I wanted to write the second one. And it was kind of, I started writing it, and then you sort of had that sort of bit of, weirdly, this is odd, I started writing it. And then it was like, oh, what's the point of this? Because, the first one's not coming out. We haven't done anything with the first one. And it was kind of, so weirdly, I wrote the first few chapters. I stopped. I wrote what ended up becoming the opening scene of Disaster Inc., which is the first book of Bunny in America. Because I just had the idea of Bunny in American Diner, which is how that book starts. I actually wrote that. And then we decided we were going to publish the books ourselves and stuff. So I ended up writing that and then just leaving it to the side for a couple of years, going back. And then once I knew the first book was coming out, it was sort of a lot easier to get motivated to write the second one. Which is why the second one comes out. It actually came out like 4 or 5 months after the first one, which was, pretty quick. And it was, it's sort of weird things like that. But yeah, I do remember that. And I was supposed to go to Edinburgh that year, and then stuff changed and I didn't and all that. But yeah, it's weird how you remember that specific time in your life. But yeah.
I've just actually listened to that first scene in the diner in Disaster Inc. yesterday.
Oh yeah, because you're saying you got to America. Yeah, I really like that scene. There's a couple of scenes that you sort of as an author you really like. I really like the opening of Angels when, if you remember, we'll sort of discuss this next time, but when the guy's on the top of the building and looks like he's about to jump. Yeah. And I had the idea of Bunny sitting up there eating his sandwiches. I just love that image. And Disaster Inc. was the one with the diner where it's him, because I love, when I was in America, I love all the stuff with the give me a number 6 and submarine it and all that sort of weird stuff they do when they're ordering food in American diners. I just love all that stuff. So I actually got like a list of all those things, and then I just made up some. So half of that's like nonsense that I made up, but half it's the thing. But yeah, there's weird little obsessions that you get with things like that. Like in The Day That Never Comes, there's a couple of scenes that you sort of favorite ones. Like there's one in it that I really like, which is, if anyone remembers, basically a body needs to be discovered. It's the one where the guy's found hanging off the the billboards, and he's been basically crucified and it's quite bloody especially for me. But a body being discovered is like a scene that you have to have in these, any of these books. It's like a standard scene. It has to happen. And what I like about that is I quite like that scene because if anyone remembers the scene, it's from this girl's perspective where she's trying to lose her virginity in a smart car with the guy, and they're at it in the smart car, and she's thinking about, because basically it's whatever. She's like a really organized person. It's one of the 6 things she wanted to do in her first year of university. She wanted to learn to play the bass and do all these things and like lose her virginity. And she's trying to lose her virginity in a smart car. And then she noticed the guy thing. What I love about that is I do this thing where it's another thing I do in my writing a lot, where some people hate it, but most people quite like it, where I kind of do short story chapters. Like I introduce that girl. We kind of find out a bit about her. how she ended up in this car, you know, having sex and the whole thing, and you know, she ends up being, and then it ends with her seeing the body, and then we never see her again, and it's basically she is the self-contained little chapter, that one. And yeah, that's probably been my favorite chapter. Actually, reading it back is one of the ones I really enjoyed.
Okay, so the next question was the note that you felt compelled to include at the end of the book. Just kind of talk us through that.
Yeah, I mean, for anyone who hasn't seen it, because I think we took it out with some versions of the book after a while, but basically, as you all know, homeless people take over a building in the IF Financial Services Centre in Dublin. They actually take the building that it specifically is one I worked opposite in my first job in Dublin, bizarrely. So I kind of knew the area around it. But weirdly, wrote the whole book. We were home editing. I was back in Dublin seeing my parents. Elaine was, I think, coming over, but hadn't got over yet. And I was like reading through the edits to get it ready to come out in January. And then homeless people took over a building in Dublin, like half a mile away. I mean, you literally, it was one side of the quays to the other side of the quays. Any Irish people here will remember it. I can't remember the name of the building now, but yeah, it was a big deal at the time. And I sort of was like, I got freaked out because I was like, oh God, people will think I'm sort of doing a sort of cheap, tawdry cash in kind of, and it's not, so I ended up having to put a thing in saying, oh God, you know, this isn't because of that. And because the homelessness thing is obviously a big thing in it, because I think the reason the homelessness thing, by the way, I think ended up being a big thing in the book is I wrote the book when I basically I was where we were living at the time. It was a very nice apartment in the centre of Manchester, but there was a homeless encampment outside Manchester University that anyone from the area might remember. They had a big thing where they literally had, like, they built a sort of miniature encampment under a flyover on land Manchester University owned that I walked by every day, and you were sort of seeing this, and it became a big political football. And they literally came in at like 6 a.m. on a Sunday morning. The police busted the place thing and cleared the whole thing out, and it was a real but I think that was a big thing, because the homeless thing is just, you know, it's unfortunately it's massive in Manchester, massive in Dublin now, and a bit in America. It's a huge thing there. It's just a big thing. And Apollo House, by the way, thank you, Carol. That's the name of the building that was genuinely taken over. Yeah, and it just, so I guess that was a factor in my brain that sort of ended up playing into it quite a lot. Yeah.
Okay, so the next question: what part of the book was the hardest to write?
It's weird because again, this is the part that really sort of surprised me. If I remember, it's the scene where there's a couple of scenes where Bunny is in he's been basically in captivity for a couple of weeks, and the guy Kotsia is basically beating the crap out of him. He's basically been in this nightmares thing where this guy's coming in and torturing him brutally. By the way, before we get to that, I should explain something odd. When I was writing the book, people always say, oh, was there a difficult bit? I had the idea for the book that Bunny disappears and they have to find him. But basically, I genuinely, like, the first book, people had just started to read it, and like people were kind of starting to think, and we know it was the Bunny. People seem to really like Bunny. And my second book came very close to me creating Bunny, and then Bunny not being in the book until like 95% of the way through, when they would have found him. And literally, I started writing it, and then Domi went, this doesn't, you can't really do that. So all the stuff, weirdly, all the stuff that's the flashback with him doing it over the weekend, trying to take it on the council to get to save St. Jude's, I had that as an idea for a separate novella that I was like going to give away free with the book or something. And weirdly, it took me so long. It seems really obvious in hindsight. It took me ages to go, oh, I need to put the two of them together. But yeah, it very nearly didn't. And God, that would have been a terrible book. But yeah. But genuinely, the scenes where Bridget gets thrown in with him, and you know, she finds him, and she realizes that he's like, she literally touches his face and it's been horribly swollen, and his fingers, like at one point, finger pointing the wrong way, and all these kind of things. And I have to say, like, it sounds really, I got quite emotional reading it. And it's weird because I wrote it, and like I know he's fine. He's gone on to have plenty more adventures, but I genuinely found it quite distressing, which is just odd. I mean, I'm a bit of a soft agent anyway, but Jesus, I was taken, because it is full on brutal, and it's also a kind of real hero moment for Bunny, because there is the bit, and like there is the thing with him where there's that line you have to tread with him where like women and kids, he does have the very traditional view that, he's very sort of that kind of traditional hero without being sort of, a lazy sexist stereotype and thing. But basically he's had the crap kicked out of him. He's like literally waiting for death. And then Bridget comes in, and when he thinks it might happen where she's now with him, he tells her to be quiet and he tries to drag the guy onto him. And it is a hero moment where he's basically got nothing left in the tank and he's still going because he wants to protect her. And that moment kind of got me. And it's weird because I wrote that moment, but it did. It feels like it's outside you after a while and it exists somewhere else. And that kind of got me, yeah.
But that's great. I think that just shows how kind of three-dimensional you make all the characters so that we do kind of empathize with them. And especially, I mean, that's the thing. I think that's why Bunny really kind of appeals to us, because we really see, he might have these unconventional methods, but we really kind of get a sense of his moral compass. And it's
I think it does. You do try and sort of hang on to that, and it is one of these things where you want to be careful not to sort of repeat yourself, but and I think even with actually this book, I kind of thought about that, and that was interesting because I wanted because that leaves them open to being in difficult situations and in certain circumstances, and because this book actually ended up going behind me, the next Bunny book ended up being probably a bit darker than I expected, because really I wanted things to kind of get on top of him a little bit because of decisions leading from that thing, which will become clear when people read the book. But yeah, I think the moral compass is important, and you're right. I think people do kind of, because for all the jokes and stuff, it has to mean something. And I think when people get comedy wrong when they're writing like comedy crime books and stuff is if they don't respect the person's, like the reader's time, and you've got to give them a story that still means something, even if there is, funny stuff that happens along the way. Yeah.
So the next question, did you have to do, because it's quite sort of, there were things in this, it's quite funny actually, because we both have quite a few friends who are authors on Facebook, and they quite often will go, "Hey, Hive Mind, does anybody know about this thing?" And so I found some of the things in your books, especially this one, just quite specialist and sort of complicated. I just wondered, did you have to do any special research, especially writing about all that kind of, the deals that were going on?
To be honest, kind of a lot of that I sort of bluffed. I'm not. That's probably a wrong way of putting it. But yeah, I must admit, like some people spent ages doing research and going into like police like the Gardaí actually were genuinely quite hard to find out about. I actually, Paddy Court, the Irish comedian, I think it's his brother he put me in contact with in the end, because I literally tried to get a guard, and like after the third attempt, it was like, come on, somebody must know a guard, please. And then he was very nice and answered a few questions. Very nice guy. But yeah, so that was quite tricky. But then, like the big one for this was I literally in the middle of summer when I was writing the book, I went round Dublin with a notepad and I planned a riot, which was like literally I walked up O'Connell Street and they were building the Lewis, which anyone knows Dublin is the light transit rail thing that runs through Dublin now. And they were literally digging up the whole of O'Connell Street. But I was like going, oh, there's bricks everywhere. There's literally a pile of bricks there. And there was oddly a riot of sorts in Dublin a couple of years before. I'm sure Shane Starr and a couple of people there will remember there was like it was a sort of nationalist thing. It was a bit hot. That's happened a couple of times in Dublin. It's like I hate to say this, but it is a very Irish riot where like a kind of a riot kicks off in O'Connell Street, but like Henry Street that's just literally perpendicular. No one knows, and they're all just going about their shopping. But technically, there is a riot going on, and that like happened like a couple of times in the space of 3 or 4 years. And most of the people in Dublin at the time didn't even know there was a riot, but there was police and rioters clashing. But the rest of Dublin was just sort of going, look, I'm getting some shopping in. Me and the wife have got a wedding to go to next week. I'm getting a suit. Like people sort of just move around it in a very Dublin way. But yeah, going around and planning the riot was I think, one of the oddest things. We had to do something at the end of Disaster Inc., which I want to explain now, which was also a very weird piece of research we did in America. But I'll explain that some other time.
Okay, got a couple of questions that have been passed to me. So I've got two from Eloise Began. So the first one, another very popular character. Where did you get the idea for Maggie? And what about her particular character traits?
To be honest, I think I did when I was I did a master's in creative writing at Manchester University, or MMU, which is the other one, not the good one. But which I never bothered finishing, by the way. But one of the things, I did a crime module, and they wanted us to do a thing where two people sort of meet in a crime novel, and it was supposed to be like the frigid pathologist meets the drunken detective, and they form a bond, and that kind of cliche. And I have always been obsessed with the films like K9. There was a weird Hollywood 6 months where the next big thing was buddy cop films with dogs. It was like Turner and Hooch with Tom Hanks, still his best work, I don't care what anyone says. K9, which was a cheap copy of it. K9 2, which was a cheap copy of K9. And then there was they did other K9s, which even I have not got all the way through. But I've always loved the idea of a dog as... So where Maggie's traits came from, basically, I wrote a short story, and the idea was I wanted to make it Mel Gibson's character from Lethal Weapon as a dog. So I just sort of made... I basically had the idea of being the out of control. He's a danger to himself. No one wants to be his partner, and just make that a dog. And then she was never supposed to be in the books, but I enjoyed writing it so much that it's a common theme when I'm asked questions. People sort of say characters like Phil Nellis, who is based on Phil Ellis. Yeah,
I know what you just did there.
Yeah. Oh no, I've explained before. Phil's been. But he was supposed to be in a couple of chapters, and he's ended up in 5 books now. But I have a tendency just people just sort of hop on the bandwagon, and then we all just keep rolling along. And I'm going to end up with a couple of 100 characters every book. So yes, that's. I think that answered the question about Maggie. Yep.
Yeah, and the follow up that Eloise had with, and going back to Phil Nellis, is there any chance of a few short stories prior to her time with Paul and Phil? That
for Maggie.
Maggie, yeah.
I don't know. You never know. I have an idea for something involving Maggie. That's all I'll say. But I think now, weirdly, with the bunny stuff, because actually, again, that idea honestly started off as a short story, maybe novella, and now it's a full length 90,000 word book. So I think with there will be Maggie stuff, but I'd say it'll probably end up forming some part of the next MCM investigations book, possibly, or the one after that, but because there will be a second one of that, I'm sure, because I enjoy writing that and it was a lot of fun. So yeah, you never know. And
Eloise also asks, what about the trip to France that Bunny made? What did he get up to?
It's a good point, because there was actually, it's mentioned in the book that he disappeared and he went to France, and I actually read that and went, oh, he went to France, because I didn't remember. But I would say it's one of those things where you sort of go, oh, I might do something. That might end up being a short story at some point. That you never know. Same as, because it's weird now. I've written a book sort of based in 2000, sort of post Simone, and I'll post Angels in the Moonlight and stuff like that. It's possible that I may well go on to write books in that period when Bunny's still in the police. So we could end up with a trilogy that will have 14 books in it, and then there'll be, oh, God knows what. But yeah, so you never know. But that might end up being a short story or something like that, because I read it and went, oh, that's interesting. So yeah. You never know.
She's saying he definitely had problems with the food, like when he went to the States, and you'd be complaining about the tea.
Don't do the accent. Sorry, it's a gut reaction. It's just, I didn't mean to punch you in the throat. Yeah. But no, yeah, he would. The food stuff was actually, there's a bit in this book. It's Decky, I think, talking about France, and yeah, he complains about the food in a bizarre way. Yeah, so I may have covered that already, but you never know. Okay.
So next question from Jackie Braun. And she said, to my mind, Donica Wilson and Captain Carrot, he of the Ankh-Morpork Guards.
Oh, excellent.
That's in the Terry Pratchett world, are one and the same person. Have you ever noticed the similarity? Red hair, awkward around women, occasional heroics, and not as daft as they first seem.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I'd say they are in certain ways, but I think, to be honest, I think my thing with Wilson is he basically starts off as a gobshite, like a proper dick, to be honest, and he kind of cops himself on. Like he's in the first book, he's like trying to get on TV, and he's thinking the woman who used to read the news in Irish is going to shag him and all this, and he kind of cops himself on a bit, and he becomes a better bloke as things go on. I genuinely think, because he has a Burns, who is his female boss. I think kind of like working with her sort of cops him on a bit. I've never sort of specifically said this in the book, and he's never really talked about it. There is, in the end of the final game, there is the scene with him with the American agent where she's hitting on him, which I think was the point where I started really liking it. Yeah, with the metal arm, and he's just so horribly embarrassed by, and he's just trying to, so I think Carrot's kind of more a sweet, innocent guy, whereas Wilson's a bit of a dick, and then he sort of becomes a better guy. And he will develop in future things. I've got some ideas about what might happen with him in the future. And he is, I am growing to like him. But initially, I didn't design him as a character I was supposed to like. But I have grown to like him.
Oh, that's lovely. Okay, so we got some questions from tonight. This is from Caroline Kinlock. This is a good one. Are we ever going to learn more about Bunny's childhood?
That's a very good question. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it's kind of, as an author, to be honest, you have bits and pieces in there. And it has, there is. Like, I was thinking about Bunny's first day on the job, and then going back to what was his childhood, because I'm trying to, in my own head, figure out exactly what his backstory is. I have some ideas, because obviously he has some very strong, as we discussed, the kind of moral compass and you do wonder why he is possibly so obsessed with certain things and what's in his past. So, like, I did have the idea, I think Bunny explains, I don't even know what book it's in, that Bunny explains that the Bunny nickname is like a hereditary thing. Like, basically it's passed down through his family. And I love that idea, because I actually wrote that. I don't remember what book it's in, but I remember writing it and going, oh my God, I could do like bunnies throughout history now. I had the idea of doing bunnies in the Irish Civil War, bunnies in actually the idea of doing Bunny in the Wild West, which ended up sort of in The Quiet Man, the sort of opening scene, he's on a horse, so you kind of get a bit of that. I think that whole scene came out with me thinking about it'd be great to do Bunny in the Wild West. So yeah, his childhood maybe, and who knows, I might do a sort of weird bunnies throughout history where they happen to be very similar characters to him, but you never know.
So question from Jerry Riley. So I think you sort of touched on this. When you decided to write The Day That Never Comes, how did you decide to write something so much darker than the first book, although it did set up angels in the moonlight's dark theme perfectly?
Yeah, it's sort of, I guess it was a transitional thing. I think it's definitely because it became darker, and I think that's possibly maybe more a bit more confidence as a writer. I think I said before, like when I was writing the first book, Claire Campbell and Brendan Dempsey, God love them, I wrote every few chapters and I sent them, and it was like asking, and all they had to do was write back and go, yeah, it's good. And then it was like, okay, I'll keep going. And then Elaine was obviously doing it as well. And like, whereas with the second book, The Day That Never Comes, because I kind of got a bit of confidence out of doing the first one, I think I'm writing this where nobody read any of it until I'd finished the first draft, which is what happens now. Like I occasionally ask Elaine a question, but it's usually so vague that she can't understand what I'm asking her. So, then it sort of, I guess it was kind of pushed it a bit in the subject matter. But Angels, I think, was the one that definitely did get, like, I was really worried with Angels that people were going to go, this has lost the thing that I liked. It's too dark and stuff. But thankfully, again, you always get the odd person, but most people sort of stuck with it. And I think you kind of need that. Like I said, you need the grit and you need the real emotional impact of horrible things happening and stuff. Because otherwise, it's not cozy crime. I've never written cozy. God, I've occasionally got the wrong. Cozy crime are like, sort of cats solving murders. That's one of the big things in cozy crime, Rob. I don't imagine you've read any of them. But and there is sort of there's more conventional cozy crime, but they are very cozy. And I've occasionally in promotional things, like they put me in the wrong thing, and you get the odd horrified person writing a 1-star review talking about the disgusting language, and you're going to go, yeah, you got this by mistake. You shouldn't have had it. I'm sorry. But yeah, so I think that the darkness kind of came out and maybe just wanting to explore different things, and the idea just sort of led it there, I think.
Okay, so who was next? Let's see, Sue Dickinson. Do you get feedback from non-Brits re some of the more obscure references, e.g. man, woman and dog, that had to come
to Mow's Meadow. All right, it's like, yeah, because that's a reference to the One Man Went to Mow song, which I'm guessing, it wouldn't even occur to me now that Americans probably don't have that song. To be honest, we didn't until when I did the books in America. We did actually hire somebody to sort of kind of edit from America, and the idea was that they would, tell us if we're getting anything wrong in the sort of nomenclature and stuff. So I've never we do keep it in mind about, will this be understandable? And you kind of hope that most of it along the way will be. We do occasionally get people saying, "Oh, it's quite hard." But I do, like, for example, I'm a big fan of Chris Brookmeyer, and Trainspotting, which is an amazing book as well. I don't know if you've ever read the Trainspotting book. It's a fantastic book, but it's written in proper, like, Edinburgh.
Yes,
it takes like 4 pages to figure out what things mean.
Like a code, isn't it?
Yeah, you crack the code. I mean, he's a brilliant writer, but able to what's his name again? Sorry, I'm so bad with names. Well, thank you. And he's such an amazing writer that you start reading it and going, "Oh God, I can't understand." And then it clicks in your head because you keep going, and then to the point where it's kind of hard to read the next book because you're so in that world. And like Roddy Doyle, actually, I was surprised when the Barrytown trilogy, I went back to read them, and I was amazed how they're not quite the same level as that, but they're pretty hard to. So we do genuinely, I think we do sort of think, will Americans get this? And I won't say we'll always take stuff out if we're worried that people won't get the reference, because you can, if you're not careful, you can make your work very bland that way. But I can say we do genuinely look at it and think, can we say something around it to make the context a bit clearer and stuff? But yeah, there will be some things that will inevitably skip through the net. But Americans, we do think about you. I promise, we do. That is a discussion we have.
Okay, CJ Frost has asked. Paul goes through some rough times in The Day That Never Comes. Was there a point during your writing that you felt that Paul had to be punished?
To be honest, it's kind of the weird thing where bear in mind, Paul goes through some stuff. Bunny goes through horrible. Like, Paul is going through emotional torture, whereas Bunny gets to be actually tortured. And Bridget kind of goes through a bit of that as well. So it is a weird thing that you like these people, because as you should as an author, but then you come up with ways for their life to go horribly wrong. Like at the end of A Man at One of Those Faces, him and Bridget are kind of sort of not together, but there's definitely a spark and this sort of thing. And literally the first thing you do is you go, right, got to destroy that. Because them having a happy ending is no good for this. So you think, right, we've got to rip that down again. So, and that's why, and then they take the next couple of books to sort of get it back together slowly. But you do sort of do horrible stuff. So I think fairly early on, I know there was a while actually I had Paul did something terrible. And again, as we find out later in the book, he didn't. But I do think somewhere in the process, that's the other thing I probably figured out, was I had him actually genuinely having done something horrible. And it was like, and then it was kind of going, no, because then if Bridget forgives him, she's a doormat for letting this prick be a disrespect her like that. So it was kind of one of these things. Then once you go like that, you go, right, well, somehow he has to have not done this and also done this. And that's like you end up sitting there for ages going, how can you do that and also not do it? Yeah. And then you figure it out. But yeah, you do have to, because, you don't ever want like Bridget to be a soft touch. But yeah, so everybody has to get a bit of punishment. And you can find over the books, everybody gets a bit of it.
So following on from that, Joan Sheriff Alexander, is it time for nice things to happen to him?
Whether this is Bunny or Paul, I can say categorically no, because that's a terrible book you don't want to read. No, there will be, obviously Bunny is on a mission in America. Let's just leave it at that for anyone who's read that far ahead. And Paul and Bridget, things are going. They've got, things are going all right in the final game. More or less. You trying to think about, I haven't said that things will start going badly again in the next one, because that's what needs to happen. So yeah, nice things will happen in the end. I don't think I'm probably not gonna do anyone. No, you never know. Actually, I'm not going to commit to anything. I was going to commit to something there. No, I'm not going to. No, nice things may or may not happen. I will not be. You cannot trap me in that.
Okay, so who's next? We've got a question from Glenda Curzon. Is Bunny? I like this. Is Bunny going to meet up with any of your characters from non-Bunny books?
The Stranger Times, probably not. By the way, I'm going to go back into the comments, and actually, we're going to give a prize for this. This wasn't planned, but the first person that gets this correct will get themselves a signed limited edition copy of The Stranger Times. A character from the Bunny books appears in The Stranger Times. Their name is never given. Did anyone notice who it was? And first correct, and don't guess everybody, only one guess each. But did anyone notice, if they read The Stranger Times, which character it was? There's a good chance because nobody's mentioned it. A character like pops up, nobody's mentioned it, and I honestly wonder if anybody's noticed it, because I put it in as a funny. Correct, Keith. Phil Nellis, congratulations, sir. You've won yourself a signed copy of Stranger Times. Elaine will get your address. Yeah, basically, because in The Stranger Times, which a lot of you probably haven't read yet, there's a bit in it where there's Loon Day, where all these people come into the newspaper and give them mad stories. And The Stranger Times is here now. Hello, that was weird. I think that's still Elaine, unless The Stranger Times has become sentient. But yeah, I actually put it in. There's all these people come in and start telling them their mad stories about what happened. And Phil comes in and goes, pandas have been on the moon, which is something he mentions in a previous book. And then she goes, what? I said, pandas have been on the moon. It's like, why have pandas been on the moon? I said, it's good. 3 possible ways they could have been on the moon. 1, that's where they come from. 2, the Chinese space program. Or 3, stag do that goes wrong. Because it actually even says lots of mad shit happens on stag do's. On my stag do, my mate Paul, and then he gets interrupted. But he's actually talking about what happens in The Day That Never Comes. So most people have never spotted that. But yes, I actually put it in to kind of amuse Elaine, and then we never bother taking it out again. So there is, which I think might make the TV options for both books invalid, because there's characters that appear in both of them. There may well be a lawsuit for me admitting this. But yeah, no plans for Bunny to go out yet. But there will be, there's always going to be offshoot books. I have been thinking about that, because now I've finished this, I've had 2 days off. I'll be honest, I'm now bored. And bear in mind, I'd worked the last 40 days solid writing the book. I'm probably going to start writing tomorrow. Have we covered all the questions?
We've got 2 more. We got Keith Johnson. Cool. What is the best but weirdest review you've ever got?
Oh God. I don't know if it was the weirdest. I've had some. I'll tell you a couple of ones I've had that were, but I'll tell you the best and weirdest. The best was the one that actually says, "I laughed so hard a neighbor came round to check on me." As a comedian, you'd love that. That I was really pleased with that. I laughed so hard a neighbor came round to check on me. I was so happy with. The weirdest one was actually on the audiobook, and there's actually been weirdly 2 things. And again, Americans, as I previously said, I love Americans, but there is a small, tiny minority of Americans who, for some inexplicable reason, think that Dublin is in Scotland. And it's called the Dublin Trilogy and everything. And we had like people refer to Scottish thing. Like some guy literally for Disaster Inc. go, this guy should have stayed in Scotland. He doesn't understand America. I'm like, mate, you understand fuck all. But my favorite one is I shared it on. I forgot Morgan Jones, who's the brilliant narrator for the audiobooks. He's a former stand-up, by the way, which is why he's so good with the jokes. You might gig with him at some point. He kind of was a double act. I think he was a double act with what's the short little fella from Dublin? Anyway, but he was. I forgot we were friends on Facebook, and I shared this review. And this guy did a review of the audiobook and went, "Don't buy this, it's terrible. The main character's from Scotland, and this narrator has no idea how to do the Scottish accent." And there's like thing is as well. You've not no response. There's no way to get sort of come back on it. So it's like, and I made a mistake, and then he saw that and was like, "Oh Jesus." So have we? What was there any other questions?
Yeah, we got one more question from Keith Rainbow. I know you mentioned you weren't happy that Bunny started out being quite unbecoming towards Bridget when they first met. Did you start off thinking that Bunny would have the Jackson Lamb style of dealing with people? Further to that, is Vincent Bancroft inspired from Jackson Lamb?
Thank you very much for the question. To be honest, because I have read those books, and people know excellent books. I highly recommend them. The Jackson Lamb books. They're kind of espionage, British thrillers, really, really good. Yeah, well, Bunny sort of. Yeah, initially with Bunny, I think when I started writing him, he wasn't supposed to be a goodie. He was kind of supposed to be somewhere in the middle, I think, in my head. And then I just sort of started really enjoying him, and he started to think about it more, and he probably transformed. So he was, as I said, like in that first scene, I said last time, one of the things I really do regret is the very first time we meet Bunny, he's properly rude to Bridget in a way he just wouldn't be, and he's never been in any other book to somebody he looked like for no reason. So yeah, I think that was because I hadn't got him in my head yet. So he probably could have maybe gone in that general way. As for Vincent Bancroft being inspired by Jackson Lamb, because people have brought it up a couple of times in reviews, bizarrely. Weirdly, to be completely honest with you, because The Stranger Times is based on a sitcom script I wrote about 15 years ago. So long before the Jackson Lamb books were ever actually written. To be honest with you, it was ripped basically, I remember the note, and it was Dylan Moran from Black Books meets Jonah Jameson from the Spider-Man comics as the sort of shouty thing. That was basically what I was ripping off. And it's, to be honest, to the point where in my head it's Dylan Moran who played... well, I say it's Dylan Moran, but have you met Dylan recently, Rob? You probably met him when you were gigging and stuff. Have you met him recently?
I haven't seen him for years. I haven't seen him since he got successful.
Well, yeah, well, basically, because you know, like he used to be, this isn't telling anything out of school. I met him the first time last year, but he used to be heavily drinking, heavily smoking, like sort of this shambolic character that he'd been put in the sitcom and stuff. But these days, I know he's tour manager. I met him in Sheffield. He was sitting there drinking herbal tea. He doesn't drink or smoke anymore, as far as I'm aware. He might drink occasionally, but he's like literally into healthy living and stuff now. So weirdly, in my head, Vincent Bancroft was him. Only he's not him anymore, so he can't play as well. Look, I'm sure he could turn it on. He genuinely is a very good actor as well as an incredible comedian. Anyone who hasn't seen Dylan Moran, by the way, because I know it'd be American and stuff, but he's not that big a name. It's Dylan as in how Bob Dylan is spelled, and Moran as in Moran. Look him up, you'll find stuff. He's a superb comedian. Genuine. I mean, there's some really, really good Irish comedians. Dylan Moran, Darragh O'Brien, Tommy Tiernan, Ed Byrne, guys like that, Jason Byrne. But Dylan, for me, him and Darragh are probably my two very favourite ones. So it's kind of more based... I'm more ripped off Black Books than Jackson. Though I do agree. People have said, because you go, well, they're both heavy smokers and they both drink whiskey, and you kind of think, well, yeah, that's true. But everyone who makes an alcoholic, whiskey is always their drink. It just seems to be the default thing. And, you know, and much as I love the Jackson Lamb books, Mick Herron did not invent bitchy alcoholics. In fact, myself and Rob could sit here for the next 10 minutes and name one every 5 seconds. And my point is, well, it is a great archetype. He didn't invent it, which I'm sure the man would say himself. There's a weird fact here. Do you know Gary Bushell? Do you remember that sort of right-wing guy who writes for tabloid newspaper? Yeah, he used to have a TV show and stuff. He wrote a thing in the Star a few years ago. I think it's the Star he writes for, saying how he loved my books and he loved Mick Herron's books. And we were like, ooh. And I think we ended up sending him a book because we were like, look, he's a national newspaper. We need the coverage. We're like, oh, God, all right. And I felt horrible after that. And then I met Mick Herron at the Harrogate Festival, and I told him he'd had a drink. I genuinely think I sobered him up in Rooney's night. Gary Bushell's a big fan of yours. Is he? But there you go. Horses for courses. I think, have we covered everybody's questions? I hope that was all right, folks. Sorry, maybe Smithy goes to Dublin. Yeah, I mean, you genuinely... will there be more Smithy books? Sorry, just seeing this while I'm just quick with Karen. Smithy will definitely appear in more books, and I'm sure he will at some point come round. I really enjoyed Welcome to Nowhere. It's the kind of Marmite book, because I wrote it in lockdown last year. How I wrote Welcome to Nowhere is I basically sat there and went, I'm going to just have fun and come up with the most mental ideas I can. And I genuinely love that book, but it is, even when we released it, we went, it won't be for everybody. Some of you love the ride. Some of you, it's going to get a bit crazy. There's a lot of blokes wearing not much clothing and leather. It's like I think I described it like a sort of gay nightclub gets into a heavily armed gay nightclub in the middle of the desert. Like it gets Mad Max weird. It gets properly crazy. That's Welcome to Nowhere, and I loved it for that. But it was my most out there book. So I'm sure there'll be Smithy Adventures in the future, because he's one of my favorite characters. I genuinely really love him. And as for Diller, he's obviously my favorite character. I named my dog after him. I mean, there's literally in my world there is no higher praise. Any chance of me going back to stand up? No, zero, none. Don't like driving. To be honest, I'm just hoping other people get to go back to stand up some point soon. I mean, when was the last time? Have you been gigging? Because I know you're Rob, by the way, is weirdly he's also a highly qualified tennis coach, which is what he does most of the time. He's also got bionic hips. He's basically he's more machine than man now. Would that be fair to say, Rob, at this point?
Yeah, well, yeah, I got 2 new hips 4 years ago.
Yeah. Now he can climb buildings. It's fucking. You want to see it? It's incredible. At the end of this, just climb up the wall there behind you and hang on the roof. We love every time he does that. It's a showstopper. But yeah, no, he's amazing. He's bionic, and so no plans to go back to stand up. I think at some point I'm probably going to be doing a book tour somewhere, possibly in Germany. Might be my first book tour. Although every time you look at the news, you think October might not happen. But yeah, so I'll probably be doing. So I would imagine what you'll get is me fulfilling my stand-up urge, doing these things once a month, and then doing overly long book things where the staff will be going, he's been on for 2 hours now. Can we just sort of just sign a couple of fucking books and get out of here, you fucking idiot. But yes, Bionic Rob can play the werewolf from Stranger Times. You can indeed, Rob. There's a part for you. Have you ever acted? You strike me as a man who could, if you could ever turn this at your hand, because you're very good at accents and stuff. I mean, not the Irish one, but the other ones I've heard you do.
Not for a long time. When I was younger, I did. I was very, very into it at school.
Oh, right. I was going to say, up until you said very into it at school, I went, wow, this sounds a lot like Rob has done porn. The bionic hips, to be fair, would be invaluable. France book tour. So I'm just looking at the things here. I would happily go. Glasgow. I love Glasgow. My last ever stand-up gig was deliberately in Glasgow. I finished my career at the Glasgow Stand Up. That was the one I chose to go out on. And any comic will tell you best place to go.
A lot of comics haven't got to make the choice of where that last gig ever was.
A lot of people have ended their careers in way worse gigs than that. That was the one that I managed to pick and then do. So yes, and listen, folks, thanks a million. You've been absolutely fantastic. Elaine is going to pick out a couple of. I will be coming to Germany definitely sometime soon to do the Stranger Times tour. The stand is incredible, by the way. Sorry, I'm sorry. I keep wrapping up and then I keep answering people's things in the comments. I need to stop reading the comments. Yes, thank you very much for all of you coming in. Elaine, do you want to pop on? Is there anything I need to tell people? We'll probably be doing this again next month, Angels of the Moonlight, maybe the month after, because we're on holidays in a few weeks, so we'll see. Is there anything else, my love?
Only that I will randomly select. I will be putting anybody who's commented this evening. I will enter your name into a drawer using my wonderful, magical, colourful wheel.
Oh God, she's got this thing she found on the internet. And I'm like, just pick 3 names at random. Every time we have a competition, she spends 2 hours making sure it's as fair as possible by putting everyone's in and like literally blindfolding herself, going outside the room, ringing somebody else up to come around and press the button so she's not touching it. So yes, it will be entirely random. And yes, so I hope that was good, folks. Thank you very much.
The lucky winners, and we will send you a signed copy of The Day That Never Comes.
We will indeed. And we're also going to send Thingy a signed copy of the Stranger Times, the limited edition, because he correctly got the Phil Nellis thing. I think that's everything. The Quiet Man's out on audiobook, but I'm guessing most of you know that already. It's now on Audible because they pulled it. They genuinely, by the way, I didn't make that up for the email because like people have been bugging us for months, Rob, about when's the latest Bunny book coming out on Audible. And we like, literally the last email we sent out was like, it's coming very soon. Like 47 minutes later, after sending an email to like 14,000 people, Audible sent the email to tell me it was out. It was like, ah! I've been literally 3 months of people asking, and that was the first time we could tell them. Well, listen, folks, we shall leave it there. I should point out this is all sunburn, not alcohol, because it does look like I am aware I've crossed the line now between bloke who sleeps out on a bench. It does have that look to it now. I think Yeah, I better, before my mother decides to randomly video call, we're going to have to sort this out, love, because I'm going to get some shit for this from my mother. She's a lovely woman, but she's not afraid to criticize. Rob, thank you very much, sir. You've been an absolute star. Wherever you are, ladies and gentlemen, just applaud now for Rob Heeney. He won't hear it, but at some part of his psyche, he will hear it in the back. And, you know, God knows, stand-ups now are going through withdrawal symptoms, so even the idea that you're clapping will cheer him up.
Thanks for having me. It was great. And
I really appreciate it, mate. And really thank you for coming in. And hopefully I'll have you again soon. And good luck with all the tennis and the...
we're back now. Back on Monday, a couple of days ago, so it's pretty full on.
Yeah, I'd imagine it is. All I know is I can no longer walk the dog on the golf course. That's the thing that's really upset me. That was my dream come true, walking the dog on the golf. It was amazing because most people didn't even... Because they've got signs up saying you can't go in. And